Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk about early Axis aggression, the early phases of World War II. Now, this is going to probably most likely be in two parts. I'm going to give you guys notes today and notes on Thursday. We're going to do the early part of Europe today, and then on Thursday I will give you notes and explain how that's going to go. So, 2 weeks ago, when we started World War II, we talked about Hitler annexing certain parts of Europe, Czechoslovakia, Austria, and he finally invades Poland in September of 1939. Now, if you remember, Hitler's going to take half of Poland, and the Soviet Union is going to take another half after the invasion. This was the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact. So really, the reason I bring that up is because Germany does expand into Poland by 1939, half of it. Then by 1941, we're going to take a look at the map of Europe a little less than 2 years later, and you can see the difference. Again, here to here. You can see now not just Germany, but the whole Axis powers of Europe, which was mainly Italy and Germany, had expanded all the way from the French and Spain border to the Soviet Union, and we see parts of North Africa as well, taken over by the Axis. So how does this all happen? Well, after the Blitzkrieg in September of 1939, we know that Great Britain and France declared war on Germany. And in accordance to the Rome-Berlin Axis, Italy is going to declare war on Great Britain and France. Japan is going to declare war on French and British colonies in Asia. So the World War begins. It's pretty much going to extend across continents. So ironically, after the invasion of Poland, there wasn't much fighting, partly due to the winter, the cold weather. Nobody wanted to invade or counter-invade. What we're going to see is Germany and France are going to fortify the area between their countries through neutral Belgium. Germany prepared for a French invasion, and France, scorned by the first invasion from World War I, starts to fortify the northern part of France. This time period was known as the Sitzkrieg or Phony War because no actual fighting happened. And then right after the winter, early spring, Hitler is going to begin to blitz other parts of Europe, including Denmark, Norway, Netherlands, and Belgium. Sorry, you could hear me slamming my keypad there. And what's going to come next is going to really be a major surprise, because once Hitler secures the lowlands, or its northern part of mainland Europe, is referred to as the lowlands, Denmark and the Netherlands, Hitler's going to prepare now to invade France. So again, going back to what I had said, both sides begin to secure this border along Belgium. You had the Siegfried Line here in Germany. You had the Maginot Line here in France. Hitler is going to do something very unique. There is an impassable, or considered at the time, impassable mountain range that runs along southern France. Now, if you have a mountain range like this, you don't believe that you need to build something that is going to stop the enemy, because nobody can get over these mountains. Well, after Hitler invades the Netherlands and Denmark, he does just this. He kind of does not go through the Maginot Line of France, which everybody thought he would. Instead, he's going to go over the Ardennes, an impassable forest and mountain range here. So he's going to begin this invasion of France and swoop upward and begin to push French and British soldiers here to the North Sea. So we could start to see Hitler's early tactics. He seems a very competent commander, not so much towards the end of the war. Again, I had mentioned that Maginot Line. If you want to take a look on your own time at this slide a little bit further, this is the series of underground fortifications that France had built to defend that Belgian border. So let's talk about the Nazi invasion of France. There was a movie not too long ago called Dunkirk, which was based upon this invasion, or evacuation, I should say. Because if you take a look at this map here, as soon as Hitler pushes through the mountain range here, he's going to push British and French soldiers, like I had said, to the English Channel. Now, What's unique about this is Hitler pushes these 338,000 troops, British and French, to the English Channel. They have to evacuate. They're going to be escorted by civilians at one point across the channel, which was an awesome story in itself that civilians came to the aid of British and French soldiers. But what's very unique about this is Hitler did not pursue across the English Channel. And some may say that this is one of his major blunders of World War II, a series of major blunders, like kind of like the first one. If he had gone and pursued across the English Channel, he probably could have finished off the French and British, putting an end to the war, and then doing what he would see fit next. But as history tells us, he doesn't do that. He stops on the shores of France at Dunkirk and does not pursue, and the British and French escape. Also, within this time in Great Britain, Winston Churchill is going to replace Neville Chamberlain. If you remember Neville Chamberlain, he's the guy that signed the Munich Pact and believed in appeasement and pretty much allowed Hitler to do all this. So Churchill defeats Chamberlain. He becomes the prime minister, and his motto pretty much is never, never, never give up. His leadership style was very effective in resisting Nazi invasion throughout the war. Now, the French are going to be referred to, now these are the French that escaped, are going to be known as the Free French. They are going to be led by a general, Charles de Gaulle, who would become the head of the Free French, who was in exile in Great Britain. So, June 22nd, 1940, very important date, France surrenders. France is divided into occupied France in the north, up here, the lighter green, and Vichy France here in the south. Now, Vichy France was a puppet government ran by Henri Pétain. Now, a puppet government meaning pretty much if you were loyal to the Nazis, they weren't going to mess with you that much. They controlled it. It was an annexed area, but they set up a puppet government. Hitler sets up a puppet government to run things as is. You could still go to the movies. You can still attend an opera or whatever type of entertainment that there was. Unless you were considered to be one of those inferiors, then you would be deported, such as Jews, Gypsies, Romas. Then you would be deported. You'd be ghetto deported east for labor or extermination. But anyway, sorry, excuse me. So the north was occupied France. The German army kept this area occupied because strategically they wanted to be able to launch invasions against Great Britain or whomever else they needed to. So think of a major kind of military base is what northern France was. Yes, civilians did live there, but they didn't enjoy the luxuries that you would have in Vichy at all. Now, you may wonder, what were the Italians doing? Not much. We're going to see time and time throughout the war where the Nazis are going to have to come to the aid of the Italians in North Africa, where they did a majority of their fighting, and in the Balkan Peninsula. So this unique friendship was unique in the fact that Mussolini was not really pulling his weight when you compare him to the Germans. So there you have it. By 1940, we're going to see now Norway, France, Germany, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium start to all fall under the Nazi regime. And of course, you still have Italy, and I showed you North Africa before. So if you're Hitler, where are you looking next? Hitler isn't going to go into Spain. If you remember, Francisco Franco was a fascist ally, so Spain is going to remain neutral. Hitler is going to then begin to set his sights on what we refer to as the Balkan Peninsula here: Greece, the rest of Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Romania, this area here. And remember, we have Turkey, which was the Ottoman Empire during World War I. What was the United States doing? The United States, if you remember back to our PowerPoint 2 weeks ago, the United States was practicing neutrality. They had passed the Neutrality Act in 1935, where they could not aid nations at war. So President Roosevelt is going to begin to find his way out of neutrality. He and other hawks favor war and helping the Allies out, but there's a lot of Congress that still is not going to want to pull the United States out of isolationism. So the United States comes up with a way to supply Great Britain to keep them in this war. We are going to tell Great Britain they have to pay cash for weapons and they have to carry them themselves. That way, we are not in harm's way as a country at all, but we will begin to supply weapons. So the United States, when it begins this production, if you remember, the United States is still in the Great Depression. This is kind of that rearmament that Hitler did back in the early 30s. We begin to rearm, we begin to open factories, and we begin to put people to work making our war machines. One of the most important battles of World War II is the Battle of Britain. Hitler is going to begin invading Britain in 1940, early August of 1940. Now, this is going to be the first time that Hitler is going to conduct an offensive just aerial. If you remember, Hitler was big into the Blitz. He was not going to use the Blitz in attacking Great Britain. Some believe that Great Britain had too many cliffs, that it wouldn't be effective sending ground troops and tanks, but he does not. He's going to attack Great Britain by air in the Battle of Britain. So this is going to be fought between the Luftwaffe and the Royal Air Force. The Luftwaffe is the German Air Force, and the RAF, or Royal Air Force, is the British. The British had the advantage of having radar. So when Hitler would order his planes to take off from France, the British were very well prepared. That doesn't mean that Hitler didn't do a lot of damage to cities like London, Liverpool, Kent, Manchester. All the major military targets in Great Britain were bombed ferociously every day. But the actual battle was pretty much a stalemate in the air. And Hitler is going to call the invasion of Great Britain off in September. So Hitler is never going to be able to successfully take the island of Great Britain. And a lot of that had to do with the help that the United States, through cash carry, provided. Remembering the United States is still not at war. And there's a quote by Winston Churchill: "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed to so many by so few," meaning that the Royal Air Force were owed gratitude by saving Great Britain by the British people. Right. So, 1940, around September, October, Germany, Italy, and Japan signed the Tripartite Pact. So they make the Axis powers official by signing this pact. Also in 1940, the United States is going to be more aggressive with helping out Great Britain. They're going to pass the Lend-Lease Acts. The United States will now take the weapons across the Atlantic. And since Great Britain really has no more money to pay, the United States is going to lease, basically a credit system. The United States is going to wind up getting islands in the Caribbean for much of this, for much of the materials that they had sent over to Great Britain, but we become more aggressive. And this is when Germany begins to attack the United States shipments of goods with their use of wolf packs. If you remember, the U-boats of Germany could not cross the Atlantic during World War I. Now, during World War II, they have the ability to do so. Spring of 1941, the Nazis are going to take the Balkans, like I had said before. That was Hitler's next target. So Europe it keeps expanding under Nazi power, or Nazi power continues to expand, I should say, in Europe. So after securing the Balkans, where would Hitler attack next? Well, if you remember back to 1939, Hitler and Stalin had signed that Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact. But since Hitler felt that his Western front was more or less secured with the exception of Britain, he's ready to stab Stalin in the back, and he's going to prepare for a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. And when I say massive, if you can imagine a blitz where the front line extended from New Jersey to South Carolina, maybe even a little bit deeper, that massive. Hitler wanted the slave labor of Russians. He wanted the rich oil fields of the Caucasus in Russia. And also, there is a race for nuclear to develop nuclear weapons. So Hitler knows that there is the uranium and plutonium in Russia as well. So Hitler is going to invade. In the early summer of 1940, Hitler invades the Soviet Union. This is going to be known as Operation Barbarossa. It is the largest operation to take place during the war, German offensive during the war. Again, Hitler, if you remember Hitler's goals, he wants living space, and he believes in Nazi expansion. So now Hitler is kind of fighting a two-front war, but again, Germany now has expanded the Axis powers from what we had seen in 1939 to pretty much all of Europe and a major chunk of North Africa and into Russia.